Sarah Martinez stepped off the military transport bus at Fort Bragg, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder and determination etched across her face. At 22, she looked younger than most of the other recruits, her petite frame barely reaching 5 feet 4 inches. The North Carolina sun beat down mercilessly as she joined the line of new arrivals, each person trying to look confident while secretly battling their own nerves. The other recruits towered over her. Jake Thompson, a former college football player from Texas, stood at least 6 feet tall with shoulders that seemed to span the width of a doorway. Marcus Rivera had spent 2 years as a construction worker before enlisting, his calloused hands and weathered face telling stories of hard labor under harsh conditions. Even the women in the group appeared more physically imposing than Sarah, with athletic builds that spoke of years spent in sports or fitness training. As they waited for their drill sergeant to appear, whispers began circulating through the group. Sarah caught fragments of conversations that made her stomach tighten with anxiety and frustration. "Look at that tiny girl," someone muttered behind her. "She won't last 2 days here." Another voice chimed in, barely attempting to lower the volume. "My little sister is bigger than her." What was the recruiter thinking? Oh. Jake Thompson turned to his buddy from the same hometown and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I bet she breaks down crying before we even finish the first day of training. This isn't summer camp, princess." The comment drew snickers from several other recruits, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. She had expected challenges in the military, but she hadn't anticipated the immediate dismissal from her own peers before training had even begun. Sarah kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. She had grown up as the youngest of 5 children in a working-class family in Arizona, where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. From an early age, she had learned that being underestimated could actually work in her favor if she played her cards right. Her older brothers had tried to protect her from the rough neighborhood kids, but Sarah had insisted on fighting her own battles. She had developed a mental toughness that her small physical stature disguised perfectly. The laughter and comments continued as they moved through the initial processing. During the equipment distribution, the supply sergeant looked at Sarah's measurements and shook his head with obvious doubt. "Are you sure you're in the right place, miss? The administrative offices are across the base if you're looking for a desk job." More chuckles rippled through the group of recruits, waiting in line behind her. Sarah accepted her gear without comment, though her jaw clenched tighter with each passing moment. That evening in the barracks, as everyone settled into their assigned bunks, the teasing escalated. Marcus Rivera had appointed himself as the unofficial spokesperson for the group's doubts about Sarah's presence. "Listen, no offense, but maybe you should consider requesting a transfer before things get too difficult," he said, his tone attempting to sound helpful rather than condescending. "The physical requirements here are pretty intense, and you seem like a smart girl who could probably do really well in intelligence or communications." Sarah finally spoke up, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her chest. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm here for the same reason as everyone else. I want to serve my country, and I intend to complete this training successfully." Her response only seemed to fuel their amusement. Jake Thompson laughed outright and said, "We'll see how you feel after tomorrow, when the real training starts. Talk is cheap until you're crawling through mud with a 50-pound pack." The first official day of training arrived with a wake-up call at 4:30 in the morning. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez burst through the barracks doors with the energy of a small explosion, his voice booming commands that sent everyone scrambling to their feet. As they stumbled through their morning routine and assembled for the first physical training session, Sarah noticed that several of her fellow recruits were already looking skeptical about her ability to keep up. The morning run began at a pace that immediately separated the prepared from the unprepared. Sarah found herself in the middle of the pack, maintaining a steady rhythm, while some of the bigger recruits began to struggle with the sustained effort. Jake Thompson, despite his impressive physical appearance, started falling behind after the first mile, his breathing becoming labored and his form deteriorating. Sarah passed him smoothly, her smaller frame requiring less oxygen, and her well-developed cardiovascular system keeping her comfortable at the pace. During the obstacle course training, the real surprises began to emerge. The rope climb challenged everyone's upper body strength, and many of the recruits struggled to make it to the top. Sarah approached the rope with a technique she had learned from years of rock climbing with her older brothers in the desert canyons near her home. While others relied purely on arm strength and quickly exhausted themselves, Sarah used her legs effectively to maintain momentum and reach the top faster than anyone expected. The wall climb presented another opportunity for Sarah to demonstrate that size wasn't everything. Several of the taller recruits struggled to coordinate their movements and found their height working against them in the confined space. Sarah's compact build and natural agility allowed her to navigate the obstacle with surprising speed and efficiency. She finished third overall, ahead of most of the recruits who had been so confident about their physical superiority just days earlier. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez watched these early training sessions with the experienced eye of someone who had seen thousands of recruits pass through the program. He noticed Sarah's performance but maintained his stern, impartial demeanor with everyone. However, he also observed the ongoing dynamic between Sarah and the other recruits, noting both their continued skepticism and her quiet determination to prove them wrong. As the first week progressed, the physical demands increased dramatically. The daily runs became longer and more challenging, incorporating hills and varied terrain that tested different aspects of fitness and endurance. Sarah continued to perform well, but the other recruits attributed her success to the easier standards they assumed she must be held to as a woman. They convinced themselves that she wasn't really facing the same challenges they were, which allowed them to maintain their dismissive attitude despite the evidence accumulating before their eyes. The academic portions of training revealed another dimension of Sarah's capabilities. While some recruits struggled with the technical material and military protocols, Sarah absorbed information quickly and demonstrated an intuitive understanding of tactical concepts that impressed the instructors. Her questions during briefings showed a depth of thinking that went beyond memorizing procedures to actually understanding the underlying principles of military operations. Still, the social dynamics in the barracks remained unchanged. The other recruits had invested too much of their identity in the belief that physical size and traditional masculine attributes determined military success. Admitting that Sarah might be as capable as they were would have required them to question assumptions they weren't prepared to examine. Instead, they doubled down on their skepticism, convincing themselves that the real tests were still to come. Sarah found herself increasingly isolated from the group, eating meals alone and spending her free time studying or writing letters home, while the others bonded over their shared doubts about her presence. She drew strength from memories of her family's support and her own deep conviction that she belonged in this environment. Every night, she reminded herself that she wasn't there to make friends or win popularity contests. She was there to become a soldier, and nothing anyone said could change her determination to succeed. The tension in the unit was building towards something that everyone could sense but no one wanted to acknowledge directly. Sarah's consistent performance was becoming harder to dismiss, but the other recruits weren't ready to admit their initial judgments had been wrong. Meanwhile, Sarah was growing tired of constantly having to prove herself over and over again, only to have her achievements minimized or explained away. Something would have to give, and everyone sensed that moment was approaching rapidly. The third week of training brought the announcement that would change everything for Sarah and her fellow recruits. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez gathered the unit after morning chow and delivered news that sent ripples of excitement and anxiety through the group. They would be participating in a special joint training exercise with an elite reconnaissance unit that was testing new recruits for potential advanced training opportunities. "This is not a competition," Rodriguez emphasized, his steely gaze moving across each face in the formation. "But the performance evaluators will be watching everyone closely. Those who demonstrate exceptional capabilities may receive invitations to attend specialized schools that could define the trajectory of their entire military careers." The implications were clear to everyone present. This was an opportunity that could separate the ordinary soldiers from those destined for elite units. Jake Thompson's chest swelled with confidence as he absorbed this information. He had always envisioned himself as special forces material, and this seemed like the perfect chance to prove it. Marcus Rivera felt similarly optimistic, convinced that his practical experience and physical strength would set him apart from the typical recruits. Neither man gave Sarah more than a dismissive glance, still certain that she would be exposed as inadequate when the pressure really mounted. The exercise would span 4 days and include elements designed to test every aspect of military readiness. Navigation and survival skills would be evaluated during a solo mission in unfamiliar terrain. Combat readiness would be assessed through various scenarios, including marksmanship, close quarters combat, and tactical decision-making under stress. Leadership potential would be observed during group missions, where recruits would rotate through command positions while facing simulated combat situations. Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and determination as she prepared for the exercise. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had enlisted to pursue. But she also knew that the other recruits would be watching for any sign that she couldn't handle the pressure. She spent extra time that evening, reviewing her maps and checking her equipment, while around her the barracks buzzed with confident predictions about who would excel in the coming days. The first phase began before dawn, with individual navigation exercises. Each recruit received coordinates for 3 waypoints scattered across 15 miles of dense forest and rolling hills, along with a time limit that would require both speed and accuracy to meet successfully. Sarah studied her map carefully, plotting the most efficient route, while others rushed to begin hiking immediately, convinced that covering distance quickly was the key to success. 2 hours into the exercise, the wisdom of Sarah's methodical approach became apparent. While several recruits had gotten lost or taken inefficient routes that cost them valuable time, Sarah emerged from the forest at the first waypoint ahead of schedule and with energy to spare. Her years of hiking and camping in Arizona had taught her to read terrain features and maintain direction even when trees blocked her view of distant landmarks. Jake Thompson arrived at the same waypoint 20 minutes later, breathing heavily and visibly frustrated with his performance so far. He had relied too heavily on his physical fitness and hadn't spent enough time planning his route, resulting in 2 significant detours that had cost him both time and energy. When he saw Sarah calmly preparing to continue to the second waypoint, his expression darkened with embarrassment and resentment. The marksmanship phase revealed another area where Sarah's preparation and natural abilities gave her significant advantages. Her father had taught her to shoot as a teenager, emphasizing precision and consistency over speed or power. While some recruits struggled with the stress of being evaluated, Sarah's breathing and trigger control remained steady throughout multiple firing positions and distances. Marcus Rivera, despite his confidence and physical presence, found himself struggling with the precise motor control required for accurate shooting. His hands, strengthened by years of construction work, had difficulty with the delicate touch needed for consistent trigger pulls. After watching Sarah place shot after shot in the center rings of her targets, he began to suspect that raw physical strength might not be as important in military operations as he had always assumed. The combat scenarios that followed pushed everyone to their limits in different ways. Sarah's smaller size, which had been viewed as a liability by her fellow recruits, proved advantageous in close-quarters situations where agility and speed were more valuable than raw power. She moved through urban combat simulators with a fluidity that allowed her to engage targets while remaining difficult for opponents to track and counterattack. During one particularly challenging scenario, the recruits were divided into 2 teams for a capture-the-flag exercise that would test their ability to work together under pressure. Sarah found herself assigned to lead one element of her team in a flanking maneuver, while Jake Thompson commanded the main assault force. The exercise quickly became a test of competing leadership philosophies and tactical approaches. Jake's approach emphasized overwhelming force and direct confrontation, reflecting his football background and personal preference for meeting challenges head-on. He led his team in a frontal assault that was impressive in its boldness, but predictable in its execution. The opposing team, led by experienced trainers acting as enemy forces, easily anticipated and countered his straightforward tactics. Sarah's flanking element moved with patience and stealth, taking advantage of natural cover and timing their movement to coincide with the distraction created by Jake's assault. She had studied the terrain carefully and identified a route that would allow her team to approach the objective from an unexpected direction. Her team's success in capturing the flag while the defenders were focused on repelling Jake's attack demonstrated a level of tactical thinking that impressed the evaluating officers. The most challenging test came during the individual survival exercise, where each recruit was dropped alone in the wilderness with minimal equipment and required to navigate to an extraction point while avoiding simulated enemy patrols. The exercise was designed to test not just survival skills, but mental toughness and decision-making ability under extreme stress. Sarah drew on every lesson her father had taught her about desert survival, adapting those principles to the different environment she now faced. She moved carefully through the forest, avoiding open areas where she might be spotted, and taking time to gather natural resources that could help sustain her during the extended exercise. Her ability to remain calm and think clearly under pressure served her well as she encountered various challenges and obstacles. Meanwhile, several of her fellow recruits were struggling with the psychological demands of operating alone in an unfamiliar environment. Jake Thompson, accustomed to being part of a team and drawing confidence from group dynamics, found the isolation particularly difficult. His normal tendency toward bold action worked against him when stealth and patience were required, leading to multiple encounters with patrol units that cost him points in the evaluation. As the exercise progressed, it became increasingly clear to everyone involved that initial impressions and assumptions about the recruits' capabilities were proving unreliable. The evaluating officers, all veterans of special operations units, were taking careful note of who performed well under different types of stress and in various situations. They had seen many recruits who looked impressive in garrison environments but struggled when faced with the complex demands of actual military operations. Sarah's consistent performance across all phases of the exercise was drawing attention from the evaluation team, though she remained focused on completing each task to the best of her ability, rather than worrying about how she was being perceived. She had learned long ago that trying to manage other people's opinions was a waste of energy that could be better invested in actual performance. The other recruits were beginning to notice Sarah's success as well, though their reactions varied considerably. Some were starting to question their initial dismissive attitudes and wonder whether they had misjudged her capabilities. Others, particularly Jake Thompson and Marcus Rivera, were becoming increasingly defensive and looking for ways to minimize or explain away her achievements. The final phase of the exercise would bring everything to a head in a way that no one could ignore or rationalize away. The ultimate test was approaching, and it would definitively separate those who truly belonged in elite military units from those who simply looked the part on the surface. The final day of evaluation arrived with an announcement that stunned everyone involved in the exercise. The recruits would face a comprehensive test that combined all elements they had trained for, but with an unexpected twist that would challenge their ability to adapt and overcome unforeseen circumstances. Captain Morrison, the lead evaluator from the Special Operations Unit, gathered all participants for a briefing that would change the trajectory of several military careers. Today's exercise simulates a real-world mission that has gone wrong, Captain Morrison explained, his weathered face reflecting the seriousness of countless actual operations he had commanded. Your unit has been tasked with retrieving vital intelligence from a compromised location. However, your primary leader has been injured and evacuated, leaving the mission in the hands of whoever demonstrates the capability to step up and lead effectively under extreme pressure. The scenario was designed to reveal leadership potential under the most challenging conditions possible. The recruits would face a complex mission with multiple objectives, limited time, and the constant threat of simulated enemy forces. Success would require not just individual competence, but the ability to coordinate team members with different strengths and weaknesses toward a common goal while making critical decisions with incomplete information. As the briefing concluded, the evaluators announced that leadership of the mission would be determined through a preliminary challenge that tested quick thinking and problem-solving under pressure. Each recruit would face a scenario requiring them to devise a tactical solution within 5 minutes while being observed and questioned by the evaluation team. The person who demonstrated the clearest thinking and most effective solution would be given command authority for the main exercise. Jake Thompson approached his scenario with the confidence he had always drawn from his physical presence and aggressive personality. The tactical problem involved coordinating a multi-element assault on a defended position, and Jake immediately proposed a direct frontal attack, supported by diversionary actions on the flanks. His solution was straightforward and showed familiarity with basic military doctrine. But it lacked creativity and failed to account for several complications that the evaluators introduced as he outlined his plan. When the evaluators pressed Jake with questions about contingencies and alternative approaches, his responses became defensive rather than adaptive. He seemed more concerned with defending his initial decision than with improving the plan based on new information, revealing a rigidity that would prove problematic in actual combat situations where flexibility and rapid adaptation were essential for survival. Marcus Rivera's approach reflected his practical background and work experience, focusing on logistical considerations and resource management that were often overlooked by other recruits. His solution demonstrated solid understanding of the importance of supplies and equipment in military operations. But he struggled with the tactical elements of coordinating movement and timing attacks. His plan was thorough but lacked the dynamic thinking required for complex combat operations. When Sarah's turn arrived, she faced the same scenario that had challenged the others, but her approach differed fundamentally from what the evaluators had observed so far. Instead of immediately proposing a solution, she asked several clarifying questions about the terrain, enemy capabilities, and available resources that revealed a depth of analytical thinking that impressed the assessment team. Sarah's plan incorporated elements that the other recruits had overlooked or dismissed as unimportant. She proposed using the terrain to mask movement and create multiple simultaneous threats that would divide the enemy's attention and resources. Her solution included contingency plans for various complications and demonstrated an understanding of how different tactical elements could be combined synergistically rather than simply executed in sequence. Most importantly, when the evaluators challenged her plan with unexpected developments and changing conditions, Sarah adapted her approach smoothly while maintaining focus on the primary objectives. She showed ability to modify tactics without losing sight of strategic goals, a quality that distinguished truly effective military leaders from those who simply followed predetermined procedures. The decision was unanimous among the evaluators, though it surprised many of the recruits who had spent weeks dismissing Sarah's potential. Captain Morrison announced that Sarah would command the final exercise, with authority to assign roles and coordinate all elements of the mission. The expressions on her fellow recruits' faces ranged from shock to resentment to grudging curiosity about how she would handle the responsibility. Sarah accepted the leadership role with the same quiet determination she had shown throughout training, immediately focusing on assessing her team's capabilities and assigning tasks based on individual strengths rather than personal preferences or politics. She recognized that Jake Thompson's aggressive tendencies could be valuable if channeled properly, assigning him to lead the main diversionary attack, where his natural boldness would be an asset rather than a liability. Marcus Rivera's practical skills and attention to detail made him ideal for coordinating supplies and equipment, ensuring that each element of the team had what they needed when they needed it. Sarah assigned other team members to roles that matched their demonstrated capabilities rather than their self-perceived strengths, a decision-making process that immediately established her credibility as a leader who understood how to maximize team effectiveness. The mission itself unfolded as a complex series of coordinated actions that tested every aspect of the team's training and preparation. Sarah's tactical plan proved both flexible enough to accommodate unexpected developments and robust enough to maintain momentum toward the primary objectives, despite numerous complications introduced by the evaluating staff. Jake Thompson initially resented being assigned a supporting role rather than overall command. But as the exercise progressed, he began to appreciate how Sarah's coordination allowed him to focus on executing his part of the mission without worrying about managing the bigger picture. Her clear communication and decisive decision-making created an environment where each team member could perform at their highest level. The breakthrough moment came when the team encountered a scenario that required immediate adaptation to a completely unexpected threat. Sarah's ability to rapidly assess the new situation, communicate changes to the entire team, and coordinate their response demonstrated leadership skills that went far beyond what anyone had expected from the quiet recruit who had endured weeks of dismissive comments and skeptical glances. As the exercise concluded, the evaluators gathered for immediate assessment, while the recruits waited anxiously for feedback. Captain Morrison's debrief was comprehensive and honest, praising strong performances while identifying areas where various individuals needed improvement. When he reached his assessment of Sarah's leadership, his comments reflected genuine respect for capabilities that had been overlooked by nearly everyone involved. Recruit Martinez demonstrated exceptional tactical thinking, adaptive leadership, and the ability to maximize team effectiveness under extremely challenging conditions, Morrison announced to the assembled group. Her performance throughout this exercise meets the standards we require for candidates recommended for advanced training in special operations units. The silence that followed this announcement was profound and uncomfortable. Every assumption that the other recruits had made about Sarah's capabilities was suddenly revealed as unfounded prejudice rather than accurate assessment. The very qualities they had dismissed as weaknesses had proven to be sources of strength in the complex reality of military operations. Jake Thompson stared at the ground, wrestling with emotions he wasn't prepared to handle. His entire self-concept had been built around the belief that physical dominance and aggressive confidence were the most important qualities for military success. Seeing Sarah succeed through completely different approaches forced him to question fundamental assumptions about his own potential and the nature of effective leadership. Marcus Rivera found himself reconsidering not just his opinion of Sarah, but his understanding of what military service really required. His practical background had given him certain advantages, but watching Sarah's analytical approach to complex problems showed him capabilities he hadn't developed and hadn't recognized as valuable when displayed by others. The other recruits experienced various degrees of surprise, embarrassment, and grudging respect as they absorbed the implications of what they had witnessed. Some began to understand that their initial dismissal of Sarah had revealed more about their own limitations and prejudices than about her capabilities. Others struggled with cognitive dissonance, finding it difficult to reconcile their preconceived notions with the undeniable evidence of her exceptional performance. Sarah accepted the recognition and praise with the same quiet professionalism she had shown throughout the entire experience. She had never sought to prove anyone wrong or to diminish anyone else's achievements. Her focus had always been on becoming the best soldier she could be and contributing effectively to any mission she was assigned. In the weeks that followed, Sarah received official invitation to attend several specialized training programs that would prepare her for assignments in elite military units. Her fellow recruits watched with mixed emotions as she departed for advanced training that most of them could only dream of accessing. The experience had taught everyone involved important lessons about the difference between appearance and capability, assumption and reality. Jake Thompson eventually approached Sarah before her departure to offer an apology that was difficult for him to articulate but important for his own growth as a person and potential leader. He acknowledged that his initial judgment had been unfair and based on stereotypes rather than actual observation of her capabilities. The story of Sarah Martinez became part of the informal history shared among drill sergeants and training personnel at Fort Bragg, an example of why experienced military professionals learn to look beyond surface impressions when evaluating potential. Her success opened doors not just for herself, but for future recruits who might otherwise be underestimated based on characteristics that had nothing to do with military capability. Years later, as Sarah advanced through increasingly challenging assignments and leadership positions in special operations units, she often reflected on those early weeks of training when her fellow recruits had been so certain of her limitations. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about perseverance, self-confidence, and the importance of proving yourself through actions rather than words. More importantly, it had shown her that the most significant obstacles to overcome were often the assumptions and prejudices of others, rather than any actual limitations in her own capabilities.